What if the clearest, most vivid memories you possess never actually happened? What if you could recall every detail of an evening spent with loved ones, remember every word of conversations you had, every dish you ate, every laugh you shared, only to discover that according to everyone else that evening never occurred? What if your most treasured memories existed only in your mind, with no evidence in the physical world to prove they were ever real? These aren't stories about forgetting or misremembering. These are accounts from people who have crystal clear recollections of events that, according to all available evidence, never took place. Events that left no trace in photos, no marks on calendars, no receipts or tickets or any of the countless pieces of documentation that normally verify our experiences. Events that everyone else involved insists never happened, despite memories so detailed and specific that they feel more real than the present moment. Amanda Torres discovered this terrifying disconnect between memory and reality on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning. She woke up feeling content, slightly full, and with a warm sense of connection that came from having spent the previous evening at her mother's house for dinner. The memory was absolutely clear in her mind. She'd driven to her mother's apartment after work, arrived around 6:30, and spent 3 hours enjoying her mother's famous chicken enchiladas while catching up on family news. Amanda could remember every detail with perfect clarity. Her mother had been wearing the blue cardigan Amanda had given her for Christmas, the one with the silver buttons that caught the light from the dining room chandelier. They'd eaten at the small kitchen table, the same table where Amanda had done homework as a child, and her mother had served the enchiladas on the floral-patterned plates that had belonged to Amanda's grandmother. The conversation had ranged from Amanda's stressful work project to her mother's book club to plans for an upcoming family reunion. Most importantly, Amanda remembered the emotional tone of the evening. They'd laughed about Amanda's disastrous attempt at recreating the family enchilada recipe, commiserated about Amanda's difficult boss, and made plans for her mother to visit Amanda's apartment the following weekend. It had been exactly the kind of comforting, ordinary evening that Amanda treasured, the type of simple family connection that formed the foundation of her relationship with her mother. So when Amanda called her mother Tuesday morning to thank her for the dinner and confirm the weekend visit, she was completely unprepared for her mother's confused response. According to her mother, Amanda hadn't visited in 2 months. There had been no dinner the previous evening. Her mother had spent Monday night alone, watching television and going to bed early. She expressed concern about Amanda's confusion and suggested that perhaps Amanda had dreamed the visit or was mixing it up with a previous evening. Amanda's first reaction was to laugh, thinking her mother was joking. But as the conversation continued, it became clear that her mother was genuinely confused and worried. She insisted with absolute certainty that Amanda had not visited, that they had not shared dinner, that the evening Amanda remembered so clearly had never occurred. Determined to prove her memory correct, Amanda began gathering evidence. She checked her car's GPS history, expecting to find confirmation of her drive to her mother's apartment. The GPS showed no trip. Her car had remained parked at her own apartment building all evening. She reviewed her credit card statements, looking for the gas station receipt or parking payment that should have been there. Nothing. She scrolled through her phone's photo gallery, certain she'd taken a picture of the beautifully plated enchiladas to post on social media. No such photo existed. Most disturbing was when Amanda checked her work calendar and email. According to her electronic trail, she had attended a video conference that had run from 6 to 8 p.m. on Monday evening, the exact time when she remembered being at her mother's house. Her email contained detailed notes from the meeting written in her own style and addressing topics she vaguely remembered discussing, though the memory of the conference call felt distant and hazy compared to her vivid recollection of dinner with her mother. The physical evidence was overwhelming and consistent. Amanda had not left her apartment on Monday evening. She had attended a work meeting instead of visiting her mother. Every verifiable fact contradicted her memory. Yet the memory itself remained absolutely clear and detailed, refusing to fade despite all evidence that it was false. Amanda's experience wasn't unique, though it took weeks of obsessive internet searching before she found others describing similar phenomena. Marcus Chen had an even more elaborate false memory that had caused serious problems in his relationship. He remembered, with perfect clarity, a romantic weekend getaway with his girlfriend Sarah to a bed and breakfast in Vermont. He could describe the Victorian-era inn in exquisite detail. The antique furniture, the view of the mountains from their room, the elaborate breakfast served in the sunlit dining room. Marcus remembered specific conversations they'd had while hiking mountain trails, remembered the small gift shop where Sarah had bought a handmade quilt, remembered the cozy evening they'd spent by the fireplace discussing their future together. The memory was so real, so important to him, that he referenced it frequently as a high point in their relationship. The problem emerged when Sarah had no memory of this weekend at all. According to her, they'd never been to Vermont together, had never stayed at a bed and breakfast, and had definitely never had the deep relationship-defining conversations that Marcus remembered so clearly. When Marcus insisted on the reality of his memory, even showing Sarah the mental pictures he'd described, she became concerned enough to suggest he see a doctor. Marcus's investigation into his false memory revealed the same pattern Amanda had discovered. No credit card charges for the trip, no photos despite the supposedly picturesque location, no record of time off work during the weekend when this important getaway had supposedly occurred. His car's odometer showed no evidence of the 400-mile round trip. Even the bed and breakfast he described didn't exist at the address he remembered. Yet Marcus's memory remained stubbornly intact, detailed and emotionally resonant. He could still picture every room of the inn, could still recall the texture of the quilt Sarah had supposedly purchased, could still feel the warmth of the fireplace and the intimacy of their conversations. The memory refused to dissolve, even when confronted with irrefutable evidence that it had never happened. The cases multiplied as Amanda and Marcus connected with others, experiencing similar memory glitches. Jennifer Walsh remembered attending her best friend's wedding, an elaborate ceremony at a vineyard where she'd served as maid of honor. She could describe her dress, the vows the couple had exchanged, the terrible DJ who'd played outdated music at the reception. The memory was accompanied by strong emotions: joy at her friend's happiness, exhaustion from the long day, mild annoyance at the groomsman who'd flirted with her inappropriately. But her best friend insisted there had been no wedding. She and her fiancé were still engaged, still planning a ceremony that was scheduled for 6 months in the future. Jennifer's detailed descriptions of the event matched nothing in their actual wedding plans. The vineyard she described hosting the ceremony didn't exist. The dress she remembered wearing as maid of honor had never been purchased. David Martinez remembered a work presentation that had been crucial to his career, a high-stakes pitch to potential clients that he'd delivered flawlessly. He could recall his nervousness beforehand, the questions the clients had asked, the congratulations from his boss afterward. The memory felt like a defining moment in his professional life, a time when he'd proven himself under pressure. His employer had no record of this presentation. The clients David remembered pitching to had never scheduled a meeting. His boss didn't recall congratulating him. The conference room where the presentation had supposedly taken place had been under renovation during the time period David remembered, making it impossible for any meeting to have occurred there. The patterns emerging from these cases were both consistent and disturbing. The false memories were never vague or dreamlike. They were extraordinarily detailed, containing specific sensory information, emotional content, and narrative coherence. People could describe colors, textures, smells, and sounds with the kind of precision that suggested genuine experience rather than fantasy or imagination. The false memories also tended to be emotionally significant. They weren't random or trivial events, but important moments that should have mattered. Family dinners, romantic weekends, career achievements, significant celebrations. It was as if these memories were too important not to exist, even if they had never actually occurred. Most disturbing was the absolute conviction people felt about their false memories. Even when confronted with overwhelming evidence that an event hadn't happened, even when every person involved denied it and every record contradicted it, the memories remained vivid and real. The people experiencing these memory glitches couldn't shake the feeling that they were right and everyone else was somehow mistaken. Sarah Kim's case illustrated this phenomenon with heartbreaking clarity. She remembered with absolute certainty a conversation with her father about his pride in her accomplishments, a conversation that had taken place during a visit to his hospital room when he was being treated for an illness. She could quote his exact words, could remember the way his hand had felt when he squeezed hers, could recall the specific afternoon light filtering through the hospital window. The problem was that Sarah's father had never been hospitalized during the time period she remembered. He was healthy and confused by Sarah's references to a conversation that had never occurred. The hospital visit, the emotional exchange, the important words he'd supposedly said, all existed only in Sarah's memory with no external validation. What made these cases particularly unsettling was the discovery that some false memories included details that later proved to be accurate in impossible ways. Amanda's memory of her mother's apartment included a new painting on the wall that her mother hadn't actually purchased until 2 weeks after the false dinner memory occurred. Marcus's detailed description of the Vermont Inn matched a real bed and breakfast in that region, despite the fact that he'd never visited it or seen pictures of it. These accurate details within false memories suggested something more complex than simple imagination or confusion. It was as if the memories were drawing on real information from sources that shouldn't have been accessible, mixing genuine elements with impossible events to create experiences that felt absolutely authentic. Dr. Elena Foster, who had studied the lost child cases and temporal fog encounters, became interested in memory glitches when patients began describing experiences that followed remarkably similar patterns. People from different backgrounds with no connection to each other were reporting detailed memories of events that left no trace in the physical world, memories that everyone else denied, but that felt undeniably real to those who experienced them. Dr. Foster's research revealed that people experiencing memory glitches showed no signs of the cognitive impairment that typically accompanied false memories or confabulation. Their general memory function was normal, they showed no evidence of psychological disorders, and they were otherwise reliable narrators of their own experiences. The false memories weren't symptoms of illness, but seemed to be something else entirely. The psychological impact on people experiencing memory glitches was profound. They found themselves questioning every memory they possessed, wondering which experiences were real and which might be false. Relationships became strained when people insisted on shared experiences that others couldn't remember. Some individuals began documenting their daily lives obsessively, taking photos and keeping detailed journals to create external validation for their experiences. The most disturbing possibility was that these memory glitches might not be false at all, but rather real memories of events that occurred in parallel versions of reality. If Amanda had actually visited her mother in some other timeline, if Marcus had actually taken that romantic trip in a different version of his life, then these memories were not fabrications, but glimpses into alternative existences where different choices had led to different outcomes. The evidence suggested that memory itself might be less stable than anyone had imagined, that the boundary between what happened and what might have happened could be crossed by memories that leaked from one reality into another. People weren't remembering incorrectly, they were remembering correctly, but from the wrong timeline, experiencing memories of lives they were living in parallel dimensions. For those experiencing memory glitches, every conversation became potentially dangerous territory. Any reference to a shared experience might reveal another false memory, another disconnection between their internal reality and the external world. They lived with the constant uncertainty of not knowing whether their clearest memories corresponded to actual events or to lives they'd lived in some other version of existence. The memory glitches had revealed that the past might not be as fixed as people assumed, that memories could exist without corresponding events, and that the human mind might have access to experiences across multiple timelines simultaneously. The question wasn't whether these memories were real or false, but whether reality itself was stable enough to support the distinction between the two. Amanda Torres wasn't alone. Within weeks of sharing her story online, thousands of people came forward with their own accounts of detailed, emotionally significant memories that had left no trace in the physical world. What had seemed like isolated cases of confusion were revealing themselves to be part of a widespread phenomenon that challenged fundamental assumptions about memory, reality, and the nature of human experience itself. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Neuroscientists studying memory formation noticed unusual patterns in brain scans of people experiencing memory glitches. When these individuals recalled their impossible memories, their brains showed activity patterns identical to those produced when remembering genuine experiences, not the patterns associated with imagination, fantasy, or false recollection. The neural signatures suggested these people weren't inventing or misremembering events. Their brains were processing actual memories, experiences that had somehow occurred without leaving any evidence in the external world. The Chen family's case brought the phenomenon into sharp focus and revealed patterns that would prove crucial to understanding memory glitches. The entire family, parents and 2 adult children, shared a detailed collective memory of a vacation to Italy that had never happened. They could all describe the trip in perfect detail. The flight to Rome, the hotel near the Trevi Fountain, the day trips to Florence and Venice, the meals they'd shared at tiny family-run restaurants. Most remarkably, their individual memories corroborated each other perfectly. When asked separately about specific moments from the trip, all 4 family members provided matching descriptions. They agreed on which day they'd visited the Colosseum, what they'd eaten for lunch in Florence, which museum guide had been particularly knowledgeable about Renaissance art. Their stories aligned with the precision that should have come from shared actual experience. But no such vacation had ever occurred. There were no plane tickets, no hotel reservations, no credit card charges from Italy, no passport stamps. The family's 2 weeks when this elaborate Italian vacation supposedly took place corresponded to a period when all of them had verifiable documentation, placing them in the United States, attending work, going to school, and living their ordinary daily lives. What made the Chen case even more extraordinary was the discovery of physical evidence that should have been impossible. The family's photo albums contained pictures they didn't remember taking, snapshots of Italian landmarks, selfies in front of famous monuments, group photos at restaurants. The metadata on these digital photos showed they'd been taken during the time period when the phantom vacation supposedly occurred, but no one in the family remembered using their cameras or phones to capture these images. When travel experts examined the photos, they found something deeply unsettling. The images were genuine photographs of real Italian locations, not manipulated or fabricated. But they included details that suggested a time frame different from when the metadata indicated they'd been taken. A construction project visible in one photo hadn't begun until months after the supposed vacation date. A restaurant appearing in another photo hadn't existed during that time period, but had opened later. It was as if the photos had been taken during a trip that occurred in a different timeline with slightly different historical circumstances. The corporate world provided even more disturbing examples of collective memory glitches. An entire department at a technology company remembered working on a major product launch that, according to all company records, had never been planned or executed. 15 employees shared detailed memories of months of development work, marketing strategies, client presentations, and the successful release of a software product that didn't exist in any of the company's documentation. These employees could describe their individual contributions to the project, remember specific meetings and decisions, recall the stress and satisfaction of bringing a complex initiative to completion. They had shared memories of celebration when the product was released, detailed recollections of customer feedback, and collective frustration about technical problems that had emerged during testing. But the product itself had never existed. There were no design documents, no code repositories, no marketing materials, no sales records. The timeline when this elaborate project supposedly occurred corresponded to a period when, according to company records, the department had been working on completely different initiatives that none of them remembered clearly. Most unsettling, when technical analysts examined the employees' descriptions of the phantom product, they found that the software they remembered creating would have solved real problems that the company was currently struggling with. The features they described, the technical approaches they remembered implementing, were innovative solutions to challenges that wouldn't become industry priorities until months after their false memories supposedly occurred. Individual cases continued to accumulate, each adding new dimensions to the phenomenon. Michael Stevens remembered being married to a woman named Catherine for 5 years, a relationship so real in his memory that he could describe their first date, their wedding, their shared apartment, and the slow dissolution of their marriage that had ended in divorce. He had detailed memories of arguments they'd had, vacations they'd taken, everyday moments of domestic life that formed the texture of a long-term relationship. Michael had never been married. Catherine didn't exist, at least not in the reality everyone else inhabited. There were no wedding photos, no divorce papers, no shared lease agreements, no mutual friends who could confirm the relationship. Every verifiable fact placed Michael as single throughout the entire period when he remembered being married. Yet Michael's memories of Catherine were so detailed and emotionally resonant that he grieved for the loss of a relationship that had never existed. He could quote specific conversations, remember the way she laughed, recall the perfume she wore, and the songs she liked. The emotional weight of these memories was identical to what he might have felt losing an actual marriage, complete with the complex mix of sadness, relief, and nostalgia that accompanies the end of significant relationships. The phenomenon wasn't limited to adults. Children were experiencing memory glitches that revealed disturbing aspects of the phenomenon. 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez had detailed memories of an entire year at a school she'd never attended, including friendships with children who didn't exist, lessons from teachers who weren't real, and daily routines that had never occurred. She could describe her classroom, name her classmates, and recite specific things her teacher had taught her. Emma's parents were initially concerned about her vivid imagination, but Emma insisted these weren't fantasies. She became distressed when her parents tried to explain that she'd actually attended a different school during that year, showing them her actual class photos and report cards. Emma rejected this evidence, insisting that the school she remembered was real and her current school was the fiction. What made Emma's case particularly revealing was that she could accurately describe educational concepts and historical facts that she supposedly learned at the phantom school, concepts that matched her actual grade-level curriculum, but that she couldn't have learned at the school she'd actually attended. It was as if she had genuinely received education, but from a source that didn't exist in the documented reality. The memory glitches also began showing evidence of cross-contamination between timelines. People weren't just remembering events that hadn't happened. They were remembering alternative versions of events that had occurred differently. Robert Kim remembered a conversation with his father where specific advice had been given, advice that proved incredibly valuable in his career. His father remembered the same conversation but with completely different content, different advice, and a different emotional tone. Both memories were detailed and specific. Both felt absolutely real to the people who held them. But they couldn't both be accurate descriptions of the same event. It was as if father and son were remembering the same conversation from different timelines, where their interaction had unfolded along different paths based on slightly different choices or circumstances. The most disturbing cases involved people remembering tragedies that hadn't occurred. Maria Santos lived with the traumatic memory of her daughter's death in a car accident. A memory so painful and detailed that she'd spent years in grief therapy processing the loss. She could remember every detail of the accident, the hospital, the funeral, the unbearable weight of losing a child. Her daughter was alive, healthy, and currently attending college with no memory of any accident. According to all documentation, no such tragedy had ever occurred. Yet Maria's grief was genuine. Her trauma was real, and her memories of loss were as vivid and emotionally devastating as if the tragedy had actually happened. She was mourning a death that existed only in her memory, experiencing genuine psychological trauma from an event that never occurred in the shared reality everyone else inhabited. Dr. Foster's research team began documenting patterns that suggested these memory glitches weren't random errors, but evidence of something more profound. The phantom memories tended to represent emotionally significant events, important conversations, relationship milestones, career achievements, family gatherings, significant losses. They weren't memories of mundane or trivial moments, but of experiences that would have mattered deeply if they'd occurred. The memories also showed evidence of internal consistency and coherence that didn't match typical false memories or confabulation. When people were asked to describe their phantom memories multiple times over several weeks, their accounts remained remarkably stable, with consistent details and no evidence of the deterioration or elaboration that typically occurs with fabricated stories. Most significantly, the memory glitches seemed to be increasing in frequency. What had once been rare experiences were becoming more common, with new cases reported daily. People were finding that they had multiple phantom memories, different false recollections of various events spread across their entire lives. It was as if the boundary between different versions of reality was weakening, allowing memories to leak across timelines with increasing frequency. The discovery that some phantom memories included accurate information about future events added another layer of complexity. Amanda's memory of her mother's apartment had included details about renovations that didn't occur until after the false dinner memory. Yet her description of the renovated space was perfectly accurate. Marcus's phantom weekend getaway had included conversations where he and Sarah discussed plans that they actually made months later, using the same words and reaching the same decisions in reality that he remembered from his false memory. This suggested that memory glitches weren't just experiencing past events from alternative timelines, but might also be accessing future events, past events, and events from parallel realities all simultaneously. Human memory might not be confined to recording what had happened in the past, but could draw on a broader field of temporal and dimensional possibilities. Support groups formed online and in person, where people experiencing memory glitches could share their stories without fear of being dismissed as confused or mentally ill. These gatherings revealed that many people had been living with phantom memories for years, afraid to mention them for fear of being thought crazy, relieved to finally find others who understood the profound disorientation of remembering events that left no trace. The psychological support these groups provided was crucial, but they also served another function. They allowed people to compare notes and discover patterns. Members began documenting their phantom memories in detail, creating shared databases that revealed correlations nobody had suspected. Certain types of events appeared in multiple people's false memories. Specific locations recurred across different individuals' phantom experiences. Some people discovered they had phantom memories of meeting each other, even though they'd never actually met until joining the support group. The implications were staggering and deeply unsettling. If memories could exist without corresponding events, if people could remember experiences that never happened but felt absolutely real, then what did that mean about the reliability of memory itself? How could anyone trust their recollections if the most vivid, detailed, emotionally significant memories could be false? More disturbing was the possibility that these memories weren't false at all, but were bleeding through from parallel timelines where different versions of people's lives were unfolding. If Amanda had actually visited her mother for dinner in some alternative reality, if Marcus had actually taken that romantic trip in a different timeline, if the Chen family had actually vacationed in Italy in a parallel universe, then these weren't memory glitches but evidence that consciousness could access multiple timelines simultaneously. The memory glitch phenomenon suggested that the boundary between different versions of reality was far more permeable than anyone had imagined. People weren't just living one life, but might be experiencing echoes and fragments from countless alternative lives they were living simultaneously across different timelines. Every choice that created a branching point in reality might generate a new timeline, and human consciousness might have access to memories from all these parallel existences. For those experiencing memory glitches, every moment became uncertain territory. Any memory could potentially be false, any recollection could be from the wrong timeline, any shared experience might exist only in one person's mind. They lived with the constant awareness that their internal reality might not match the external world, that their clearest memories might be the least trustworthy, and that the past itself might be far less stable than ordinary experience suggested. The memory glitches had revealed that human consciousness might exist across multiple timelines simultaneously, that memory could access events from parallel realities, and that the boundary between what happened and what might have happened was far more fluid than anyone had believed. The question wasn't whether these memories were real or false, but whether reality itself was unified enough to support that distinction, or whether every person might be living in a slightly different version of events, remembering different pasts that were all equally valid in their respective timelines. The most terrifying realization was that if memories could leak between timelines, if people could remember events from parallel realities where their lives had unfolded differently, then perhaps consciousness itself wasn't confined to a single timeline. Perhaps everyone was simultaneously living countless versions of their lives, and the memory glitches were moments when the barriers between these parallel existences became thin enough for memories to cross over, allowing people to remember not just what they'd done, but what they might have done, what they could have done, what they were doing in countless other versions of reality where different choices had led to different outcomes.